All right, today we're gonna take a look at your bell work that you did and this map, and then we're gonna start chapter 1 of Treasure Island. You should have picked this up when you walked in, and on the back side, the books, you were supposed to, anybody not pick up a book, go ahead and turn on your cell phone or your iPad if you brought it. And that way it's ready to go when it's time to read. What are 3 things in our culture we discussed yesterday that are linked to pirates? Yeah? The parrot? Oh, that parrot that we think they're always going to have a parrot. Yeah, when you see, my friend used to have a parrot. They had it in the basement. It was huge. You wouldn't want it on your shoulder. And they had it in a cage. The poor thing just sat in a cage all day. It was sad. What do you got? Restaurants have pirate themes in them. The Pittsburgh Pirates. The Steelers in a way, right? Yeah? It's thieves or pirates and pirates, Steelers. Okay, anyway. What do you got, Al?
Green Bay.
What?
The Green Bay people.
Green Bay? No, Tampa Bay.
Yes.
The Buccaneers. Yes. All right, we've got a lot of clothes that we wear, like bandanas.
Long John Silver's.
Long John Silver's, that's up there hanging with the thing, right? We don't know, why do they name it Long John Silver's? It's kind of weird. Well, see if that makes sense later. 2 more. Yep.
The movies that we watch.
Like Pirates of the Caribbean. They make millions of dollars because of this romanticized version of pirates, right? And 1 more, Maren. What's something we say that is pirate-ish? Walk the plank. Well, I expect you all to use walk the plank in your vocabulary sometime in the next 6 weeks. And tell me when you used it and whether it was appropriate, okay? A reminder that we're switching to 111222333. You only have 1 disruption, so classes, if the sub doesn't do that today, we'll be starting at tomorrow. Only 1 warning, you may be on videotape today getting detention unless you just want to interact with me normally. Just a reminder to everybody, that's on there. And for future years to come, if this is the greatest video of Treasure Island Chapter 1 of all time, they may be watching this, you get a detention forever. So, I think we'll be just fine. Do you think you would enjoy being a pirate? Anybody have an answer to that? Yes?
I said no because it would smell awful and I don't like being in the same place. Like on the same place.
You don't like being trapped in the same place for a long time? So a boat for 4 months doesn't sound cool? Okay. Yes, sir?
No, because I don't like to get scared.
You don't want scurvy. We'll just carry around a lime all the time, right?
No, because they often didn't take baths and lived on the sea for months on, which I wouldn't mind if it was like a cruise ship. But
Like a 4-month cruise, that'd be fine. There's pools and entertainment, but just the boat you work on, not so much. It's survival, right? Survival. Yeah.
Said yeah because I like to be on a boat and it'd be cool to have a different adventure every day.
All right, so you don't know what's coming. So the exciting side of it. All right. Well, maybe there'll be something exciting in what we read here. Is there anything you guys noticed that you recognized? Any words that you recognized?
In the states.
Yeah.
I said Norfolk, Suffolk, and like Norfolk and Suffolk, Virginia.
Okay, Virginia has names like that. I can't answer that right now, so don't worry about it. Yeah?
London?
London? Oh, you saw London on there. Yep.
Hampshire, which was New Hampshire.
Yeah, New Hampshire is named after this, right? That it's the new, we have the New Hampshire, that's the Old Hampshire, but you don't call it the Old Hampshire because it was the original. Yeah?
Scotland.
And you actually see Scotland on there, good. And then the other country in the United Kingdom is?
Wales.
Wales. So there's some things you recognize here. And one of the cities we're going to be going to, we have a local human named it. We're going to be going to the city of Bristol eventually as well. So, and there's a Bristol, Connecticut, is usually where people remember. So, this isn't completely foreign. It's not a different planet. It's just a different country a few hundred years ago. We're going to start back on that first sentence and make sure we picked up what we learned yesterday on that first sentence on page 1. We're on part 1, the Old Buccaneer, chapter 1, the Old Sea Dog at the Admiral Benbow. We remember that we have the exposition of the story, which tells us what? What does the exposition tell us?
That the people that died,
Well, yeah, overall, what does an exposition tell us?
the beginning of the story.
It is the beginning. You know it. You're just trying. You're actually being smarter than I want you to be. Yeah.
Main characters.
We learned the characters in the setting, right? So what did we learn about the characters? Is what you were saying. Which was what? They didn't what? They didn't die. Because this whole story is what? Yeah, again?
Flashback?
It's a flashback. It's a flashback. So that means he's telling the story, saying, hey, I want to go back in time and tell you this story. So we've got to remember that throughout. And you're like, is he going to, I guarantee one of you is going to ask, is he going to live? Is he going to make it? He's telling a story. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the rest of these gentlemen, having asked me to write down the whole particulars about Treasure Island, from the beginning to end, keeping nothing back but the bearings of the island, and that only because there's still treasure not yet lifted, I take up my pen in the year of grace, we're going to say 1750, and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn. The brown old seaman with the saber cut first took up his lodging under our roof. What is he not telling us? He told us what he's not going to tell us. What is it? Sam?
The area where they are at for the treasure.
Yeah, he's not going to tell you where the treasure is. Why not, TJ?
Because I don't want people to take it.
He doesn't want anybody to take it. There's still treasure not yet lifted. Shoplifting, taken. It's not gone yet. What's the name of the hotel? Tristan?
The Admiral.
The Admiral Benbow. It's not a guy. It's not the Admiral. All right? It's just the name. It's like the Ronald McDonald House. It's not really a guy. It's just the place. Well, I remember him. Who's him? I remember him as if it were yesterday. Faith, who's him?
Brown old seaman.
The brown old seaman. I remember him as if it were yesterday. He came plodding into the inn door, his sea chest following behind him in a hand barrow. A tall, strong, heavy, nut brown man, his tarry pigtail falling over his shoulders of his soiled blue coat, his hands ragged and scarred with black broken nails, and the saber cut across one cheek, a dirty, livid white. I remember him looking round the cove and whistling to himself as he did so, and then breaking out in that old sea song that he sang so often afterwards. 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo, and a bottle of rum. In the high old tottering voice that seemed to have been tuned and broken at the capstan bars. Then he rapped on the door with a bit of stick, like a handspike that he carried, and when my father appeared, called roughly for a glass of rum. This, when it was brought to him, he drank slowly, like a connoisseur, lingering on the taste, still looking about him at the cliffs and up at our signboard. "This is Andy Cove," says he, at length, "and a pleasant situated grog shop. Much company, mate?" My father told him no, very little company. And the more, the pity. Is that a lot of people come around here? No, we don't like a lot of company. We do just fine. "Well then," said he, "this is the best for me. Here you, matey," he cried to the man who trundled the barrow. "Bring up alongside, help him up my chest. And I'll stay here a bit. I'm a plain man, rum, bacon and eggs. That's what I want. And that head up there for to watch ships off. Or what might you call me? You might call me Captain. Oh, I see what you're at there. And he threw down 3 or 4 gold pieces on the threshold. "You can tell me when I work through that," says he, looking as fierce as the commander. What are they going to call him? Captain. What you might call me. What's he like to eat? Bacon and eggs. Sounds like my grandpa. What does he want? What does he want? Yeah?
Rum and bacon and eggs.
Rum and bacon and eggs. Yeah, we've already got our first couple pirate things. He wants some rum. Didn't ask for water. He didn't ask for grog. He did call it a grog shop, though, didn't he? What else does he want? Yep.
Instead of that head up there for it to wash ships off.
Yeah, he's looking around, and this is a cove. That means that there's rocks all around. You can't really see the village over this way. There, you can't see anything over that way. And there's high rocks up above. And so he can climb up a little trail and look off in the distance and see if he can see something. Why does he want to do that? Why does he want to look to see if anything's coming? Interesting. And indeed, bad as his clothes were, and coarsely as he spoke, he had none of the appearance of a man who sailed before the mast, but seemed like a mate or skipper, accustomed to being obeyed or to strike. He's not one of the guys just working, cleaning the deck. He's the guy standing back telling people what to do. This guy seems like he's in charge. The man who came with the barrow told us the mail had set him down the morning before at the Royal George, that he had inquired what inns there were along the coast, and hearing ours well spoken of, I suppose, and described as lonely, had chosen it from the others for his place of residence. That was all we could learn of our guest. The guy walked, they call it the mail, as they, dropping off the packages. He had been dropped off and then walked with this guy to the store, to the Admiral Benbow, saying, "Hey, where's the best place I can stay?" And they said, "This place is probably the quietest and loneliest, and yeah, I guess you could look up there." Other than that, this guy doesn't know anything about the captain, and he just disappears. He was a very silent man by custom. All day he hung round the cove or upon the cliffs with a brass telescope. All evening he sat in a corner of the parlor next to the fire and drank rum and water, very strong. That means a lot more rum than water. Mostly he would not speak when spoken to. When they look up, sudden, fierce, and blow through his nose like a foghorn. And we and the people who came about our house soon learned to just let him be. Every day when he came back from his stroll, he would ask if any seafaring men had gone by along the road. At first we thought it was the want of company of his own kind that made him ask this question, but at last we began to see he was desirous to avoid them. He kept asking, "You see some seafaring men today?" No. Like, "Oh man, the poor guy's lonely. He wants to know if there's anybody else who's seafaring that wants he could hang out and drink some rum with." No, he wants to be alone. When a seaman put up at the Admiral Benbow, as now and then some did, making by the coast road for Bristol, because see, Bristol's that way, and here's the town over here that they're in, or the village, he would look in at him through the curtain door before he entered the parlor. So some guy would show up who looks like a sailor, and then here's our guy. And then he goes sit over here. He's always checking people out. He was always sure to be as silent as a mouse when any such was present. For me, at least, there was no secret about the matter. For I was, in a way, a sharer in his alarms. He had taken me aside one day and promised me a silver fourpenny on the first of every month if I would only keep my weather eye open for a seafaring man with one leg, and let him know the moment he appeared. Often enough, when the first of the month came round, and I applied to him for my wage, he would only blow through his nose at me and stare me down. But before the week was out, he was sure to think better of it, bring me my four-penny piece, and repeat his orders to look out for the seafaring man with one leg. So, This guy is his lookout, our narrator. Do we know his name yet? We don't. He gets paid, though, to be a lookout. What's he looking for?
Like sailman with one leg.
A sailor with one leg, a seafaring man with one leg. How that personage haunted my dreams, I need scarcely tell you. On stormy nights when the wind shook the four corners of the house and the surf roared along the cove and up the cliffs, I would see him in 1,000 forms and 1,000 diabolical expressions. Now the leg would be cut off at the knee, now at the hip, and now he was the monstrous kind of creature who had never had but the one leg, and that in the middle of his body. Just all these nightmares about this one leg coming to attack me. And now he's just this big giant leg hopping at me. To see him leap and run and pursue me over the hedge and ditch was the worst of nightmares. And altogether I paid pretty dear for my monthly 4-penny piece in the shape of these abominable fancies. What can we learn about our narrator right now? What are we learning about him? Yep.
He has a wild imagination.
He's got a wild imagination, all right? What else? Is he strong? Yeah?
He's afraid of the seaman.
He's afraid of the seafaring man with one leg, right? And he's somewhat intimidated by this sea dog who calls himself Captain. Do we know his name? No. This whole story, one of the reasons why I want to read it is because this character, I want to know whether he's dynamic or static. You guys remember dynamic and static?
Yeah.
What's a dynamic character? What's a dynamic character?
Did they stay the same throughout the entire story?
Well, remember, dynamite, you wrap dynamite around somebody, they're going to change. Whereas static is S-T-A, stay the same. All right? So, we want to know whether this character is going to be dynamic or static. All right? But we have to know where he's at first. And that's when you fill this out. I want you to be describing, what do you think he's like? What do you think he's like when we fill this out? We're not going to do that until we're done reading. But what do you think he's like? But though I was so terrified by the idea of the seafaring man with one leg, I was far less afraid of the captain himself than anybody else who knew him. There were nights when he took a deal more rum and water than his head would carry. So he says, I'm not as scared as everybody else of Captain. I think I've got this guy figured out. There were nights he would take a deal more rum and water than his head would carry. And then he would sometimes sit and sing his wicked old sea songs, minding nobody. Sometimes he would call for a glass round and force all the trembling company to listen to his stories or bear a chorus to his singing. Often I have heard the house shaking with, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. All the neighbors joining in for dear life with the fear of death upon them. And each singing louder than the other to avoid a remark. Everybody else like, oh yeah, ho-ho, great song. They're like, please don't kill me. For in these fits he was the most overriding companion ever known. He would slap his hand on the table for silence all around. And he would fly up in a passion of anger at a question. Don't question me. Or sometimes because nobody said, why aren't you asking me questions? What do you want us to do? You don't make any sense. And so he judged the company was not following his story. Why aren't you listening to me? Nor would he allow anyone to leave the inn till he had drunk himself sleepy and reeled off to bed. Don't you leave. I'm the first person who used to leave this party. I'll kill you if you leave. His stories were what frightened people worst of all. Dreadful stories they were, about hanging, walking the plank, storms at sea, and the dry Tortugas, wild weeds and places on the Spanish Main. By his own account, he must have lived his life among some of the wickedest men that God had ever allowed upon the sea. And the language in which he told these stories shocked our plain country people almost as much as the crimes that he described. My father was always saying the end would be ruined for people who would soon cease coming there to be tyrannized over and put down and sent shivering to their beds. But I really believe his presence did us good. People were frightened at the time, but on looking back, they rather liked it. It was a fine excitement in a quiet country life. There was even a party of the younger men who pretended to admire him, calling him a true sea dog and a real old salt, and such like names, and saying there was the sort of man that made England terrible at sea. He tells all these terrible tales. Why do you think he's telling about all these people dying and all these people hanging and all these people he's killed? Why is he telling stories like this? What do you think?
Well, maybe because that Peg Leg guy is trying to get him or something, and wants to intimidate him because he's afraid of all this bad stuff that he's doing.
Okay, so maybe send out the message that, hey, there's a really mean guy over here. You don't want to go mess with him, even if you do have a peg leg. When does he do it? When does he tell all of his stories?
And he's rummed up.
When he's rummed up, right? People start talking a little bit more when they start losing their inhibitions. And he starts telling them maybe a little too much about what's going on, right? He may be spilling his beans a little too much, trying to impress people. In one way, indeed, he bade fair to ruin us, for he kept on staying week after week, and at last month after month, so that all the money had been long exhausted. And still my father never plucked up the heart to insist on having more. Remember, he walked in and said, "Here, I don't tell me when I'm run out." He gave him a ton of money at the beginning, and now he's been there so long that he spent it all up. And it's like, are you going to pay us anymore? But they're too scared to ask him for money. If my father ever mentioned it, the captain blew his nose so loudly that you might say he roared. Stared my poor father out of the room, and then I've seen him wringing his hands after such a rebuff, and I'm sure the annoyance and the terror he lived in must have greatly hastened his early and unhappy death. Whoa. Who dies early? Papa Bear. What do we call that? It's foreshadowing, right? His dad's alive, but he just told us that he's going to have an untimely death, an early unhappy death. Well, I think it was because this guy was around. He stressed my dad out so much that I think it killed him. All the time he lived with us, the captain made no change whatever in his dress, but to buy some stockings from a hawker. One of the cocks of his hat, that's a feather, having fallen down, he let it hang from that day forth, though it was a great annoyance when it blew. I remember the appearance of his coat, which he patched himself upstairs in his room, in which before the end was nothing but patches. He never wrote or received a letter, and he never spoke with any but the neighbors, and with these, for the most part, only when drunk on rum. The great sea chest none of us had ever seen open. Dun, dun, dun. What's in that sea chest? He brought it in the first day. He's never opened it since. He was only once crossed. What does crossed mean? Angered, ticked off. And that was towards the end, when my poor father was far gone in a decline that took him off. See, Dr. Livesey came late one afternoon to see the patient, and the patient's his dad, right? Took a bit of dinner from my mother, and went into the parlor to smoke a pipe until his horse should come down from the hamlet, for we had no stabling at the old Benbow. So the doctor came, took care of Dad, Mom made some dinner, and they're waiting for the horse to come from the barn down the street. Well, I followed him in, and I remember observing the contrast, the neat, bright doctor, with his powder as white as snow, his eyes bright and black and pleasant manners, made with the coltish country folk, and above all, with that filthy, heavy, bleared scarecrow of a pirate of ours, sitting far gone in rum with his arms on the table. So here's the picture. What's a powder? He's got a powder? You got a guess?
Is that like a powdered wig?
Yeah, the doctor comes in, and I always picture George Washington. I don't know why. Picture George Washington with his big powdered wig, and he comes in and, oh yes, I'll take some green eggs and ham and give me this, and he's just this big, solid British guy. And then I kind of imagine, I don't imagine Captain Jack Sparrow, I don't know about you, but I imagine more the Barbossa guy from Pirates of the Caribbean being the other guy, Captain. That's who I see. And he says, it was amazing to look at, here's this bright, distinguished doctor with all these plain people, and then Mr. Stinky Pants over there. And he calls him a pirate. Suddenly, he, the captain, that is, began to pipe up his eternal song. So everybody's eating and enjoying, and here comes the doctor sitting there, and how's he going to respond to our guest's regular actions? 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo, and a bottle of rum. Drinking the devil had done for the rest, yo, and a bottle of rum. At first I'd supposed the dead man's chest to be that identical big box of his upstairs in the front room, and the thought had been mingled in my nightmares with that of the one-legged seafaring man. But by this time we had all long ceased to pay any particular notice to the song. It was new that night to nobody but Dr. Livesey. Dr. Livesey's like, what are you singing? And on him I observed it did not produce an agreeable effect. For he looked up for a moment quite angrily before he went on with his talk to old Taylor, like, shut up, you old pirate. He's talking to Taylor the gardener on a new cure for rheumatics. In the meantime, the captain gradually brightened up his own music, and at last flapped his hand upon the table before him in a way we all knew to mean, silence! The voices stopped at once. Everybody but Dr. Lucy. Well, you see, I would use this for the rheumatics so that I could find a way to cure all the problems. It's all of a sudden it's perfectly quiet in the bar. Everyone's like, shut up! This is what he wants you to shut up, doctor. And he drawled briskly from his pipe between every word or two, and the captain glared at him for a while, flapped his hands again, glared still harder, and at last broke out with a villainous low oath. Silence between the decks! Were you addressing me, sir? Says the doctor. And when the ruffian had told him with another oath that, "Here's you," that it was so. I have only one thing to say to you, sir, replies the doctor, that if you keep on drinking rum, the world will soon be quit of a very dirty scoundrel. The old fellow's fury was awful. He sprang to his feet, drew and opened his sailor's clasp knife, and balancing it on the palm of his hand, threatened to pin the doctor to the wall. The doctor never so much moved. He spoke to him, as before, over his shoulder, and in the same tone of voice, rather high, so that in the room they might hear him, but perfectly calm and steady. If you do not put that knife away this instant in your pocket, I promise upon my honor you shall hang at the next assizes. Then followed a battle of looks between them, but the captain soon knuckled under, put up his weapon, resumed his seat, grumbling like a beaten dog. And now, sir, continued the doctor, since I now know there's such a fellow in my district, you may count I'll have an eye upon you day and night. I'm not a doctor only, I'm a magistrate, and if I catch a breath of complaint against you, if it's only for a piece of incivility like tonight's, I'll take effectual means to have you hunted down and routed out of this. Let that suffice. Soon after, Dr. Livesey's horse came to the door and he rode away, but the captain held his peace that evening and for many evenings to come. What's a magistrate? Yeah?
Civil officer.
Yeah, a civil officer like a judge. Did you hold it down? That's why I had people bring it. There's some weird words in here, right? He's a judge and a doctor. That's why he's wearing the wig. He's like, hey, buddy, you gonna keep this up? Oh, I'm a prosecuting attorney. I'll just throw you in jail and have you hung. Why did you put that away? Nobody else has stood up to him before and didn't realize that if you stand up to him, what happens to old Captain?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You just needed a bigger dog. You ever seen dogs fight? And it's like, whoa, that's two mean dogs, but one of them's gonna win. Called the pack leader, right? Sea dog will back off. I think that's one of the reasons why they call him the sea dog. So, what are some questions you guys have? What are some, did I breeze over anything? Yeah.
What's the sailor's clasp knife?
Oh, that's just like what we would call what do we call that? A pocket knife. Except it's going to be bigger. So it has a clasp so that it can pop up so you don't poke yourself. Whereas they call it a dirk. A regular one is called a dirk. But a clasp knife is one that folds into the handle. Anything else that went too quick? I didn't want to, that's kind of weird, you know? It's a weird setting. People talking weird, guys singing. All right, what I want you to do is take some time to write down what are the characters and do you know their names? Did we learn any names? Let's start with the one name we do know. Who's that? Dr. Livesey. So let's write down Dr. Livesey. The next person is our narrator. I'm just going to tell you his name because it's not a big secret, is Jim. Jim Hawkins is his name.
Is it G-I-N?
J-I-M.
J-I-N.
Then we have the captain, who, as you read on today, you're going to start trying to read chapter 2 after this, the captain is Billy Bones is his name. Billy Bones. And then I think you also can write about Dad, right? Jim's father. So what I would like you to do is explain what they're like with as much information, and then I need one piece of evidence that would explain why you think that. You can have lots of ways to describe them, but one of them, I just want you to find it in the text and write it in there what they're like. Then I want you to summarize what happened in the story, and then answer the 4 questions. I think the questions are pretty easy. And then I want you to make a guess as to what you think is going to happen next at the bottom. When you finish that, you can begin reading chapter 2. I don't know if you'll get done with this, but and then because those of you who don't have the book yet, because we can't check it out, don't worry, there's no reading assignment for tonight. We'll pick it up tomorrow. All right? Do you mind cutting me off there, sir? Hopefully there was no disruptions today. Good job.